Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Nirali, and I craft, I talk about writing, music, and all sorts of other things on this channel. As someone who reads a lot of newsletters and writes a weekly newsletter, I thought it would be a fun exercise to narrow down a few of my favorites and talk about why I like them. I actually talked about a few of these in my own newsletter back in January. Wow. So subscribe if you'd like to see some previews of videos you just might. The first newsletter I want to talk about is Craft Talk. So Jamie Attenberg is this incredible writer who runs 1000 Words of Summer, which I made a video about a few years ago. I try to do it every year. And that newsletter has evolved into Craft Talk, which is a diary style newsletter about motivating yourself to write. And Jamie also talks about her life. It's always a great pick-me-up when I've been in a writing slump. I really appreciate her view on writing as someone who is a successful writer. And it's nice to kind of be in community with someone like Jamie Attenberg, who does go through things and does have writing slumps and things like that. So it's just really nice to be in community with someone who's already a successful writer and is just really awesome. The next one I want to talk about is Tom Scott. So this is YouTube. If you are watching my channel, you know who Tom Scott is. He has a newsletter where he talks about things across the internet, whether it's on YouTube or off social media entirely. He often has these like random websites, which I feel like we need more websites in this world. That's just a me thing, but I really love discovering new websites where people are doing their own thing. It really reminds me of the old internet. And Tom Scott is a great resource for that kind of thing. I'm actually a lot better at keeping up with his newsletter than his podcast because he posts about so many interesting things that I can't help but click on them and discover what cool new thing Tom Scott has found. Yeah, I learn a lot of fun random facts, which is very in line with Tom Scott's YouTube channel. The next newsletter I wanted to talk about was Lakshmi and Asha. If you want a conversation with book lovers, this is the newsletter for you. These newsletters read like a podcast or like a chat transcript, with Lakshmi and Asha going back and forth on their thoughts on their latest reads or watches. More often than not, they're discussing Asian writers and films, and like more often than not, South Asian writers and films. And I've gotten like a lot of really good recommendations from them because they have such a great niche focus. It's completely different than any other newsletter that I've read because it feels conversational and like you're reading a podcast transcript. So if you want to try that sort of thing out, I highly recommend Lakshmi and Asha. Next up, I want to talk about Prison Culture's newsletter, which is called Prisons, Prose, and Protest. This is a monthly newsletter by Miriam Kaba, who I more know as Prison Culture. She was very, very popular on Twitter talking about prison abolition and all sorts of other social issues. In this newsletter, she discusses her research into prisons and abolition, and also a lot of current events like the current movement to divest from Israeli academic institutions. I really appreciate her because she is this amazing radical thought leader, and if you want to learn about this, like, go directly to the source, go to Prison Culture's newsletter. It's really incredible. I learn so much every time I open up a newsletter from her. The next one I want to talk about is completely different. It's called I'm Fine, and this is a newsletter by N.D. Stevenson, who's the artist behind Nimona, who was the showrunner of S-Pop or She-Ra Princesses of Power. And it's this amazing kind of comic diary. So N.D. Stevenson is a graphic novelist, so these are kind of like memoir sketches, and they actually wrote a memoir called The Fire Never Goes Out, which is a graphic novel memoir. I don't want to say graphic memoir because that sounds like you're going to be reading trauma porn. It's not that, but it's a graphic, it is a memoir made up of graphics that that you would think about more in terms of comic books or graphic novels. And so this kind of feels like updates to that memoir, because that was written a long time ago. They hadn't come out as trans yet or anything, and he used to also post illustrations on Tumblr, and that's how he actually got his start. And it just really is a great culmination of all of that, and it's really cool to see updates on his life and, like, you know, what someone who is in the, like, cartoon world is up to, because it's a completely different world than I'm familiar with. And, you know, we got to see the media tour that he just went on for Nimona and all sorts of things like that through his drawings. You might notice that I'm flipping back and forth between pronouns. They have been updating their pronouns slowly but surely. And I'm pretty sure they're using they, he, but I will post a correction here if not. Sorry about that. I am just not exactly up to date on their pronouns today. I love queer people. I love gay people. We just are continually discovering ourselves and just doing new things with our identities and exploring ourselves, and I just really love that. But sometimes, as a filming, he calls himself ND and also Nate, so that's where I am filming from. It might be different by the time you watch this. The next one I want to talk about is Brandon Taylor's newsletter. I signed up to it back when it was called Sweater Weather. It is not anymore. But if you want, like, these incredible explorations of literature from one of the literary greats of today, like, if you want to read a modern master of the English language, this is for you. Brandon Taylor is the author of Filthy Animals and Real Life and The New Americans, and he actually just signed to do 2 nonfiction books with the company I work for, but this is not me promoting him in any way that I have a financial investment in. I am just full disclosure, I am potentially going to get to work with him soon, and I'm very psyched about that, but I have been subscribed to this newsletter for years, and in this newsletter, Brandon Taylor reflects on his own writing. He recently had a really interesting piece reflecting on his MFA statement of purpose. And also he just talks about what he's reading and thinking about. He had a really poignant and important conversation about the news that has arisen about Alice Munro and his own experience with CSA, of course. Content warning on that. He also has a lot of fun things to read. If you follow Brandon Taylor on Twitter, you know he's a lot of fun to read when he is exploring a movie or a book he really loves. And yeah, if you were a fellow English major, this is very much our thing. I really like it. So the next one is the Rec Center. I am not really loud about this anymore, but I'm still very much consuming fandom content, and this newsletter is always my first stop if I am in the mood to read some good fanfic. They round up some amazing fanfiction, current articles discussing the news in fandom and some of the latest discourse, and they also put some amazing fan art in there. And for the fanfic recs, they tend to do a different theme every week, which is nice. So if, there's coffee shop AUs, they'll do a week of where they recommend a few good coffee shop AUs or something like that. And it's really fun to explore how different fandoms tackle different tropes. And I've read a lot of incredible fan work because of this newsletter. So definitely check them out if you're a fangirly like me. Next is Media Monday. Oh, hey, it's my newsletter. Media Mondays is a weekly newsletter by yours truly. I discuss pretty much everything I've consumed over the week, articles, books, music, TV, movies, and the things that I've made from my writing and kind of my writing process. I've been taking classes and kind of reflecting on those classes a lot in my Media Mondays, and Also, updates to my current projects. I actually have one right next to me that I meant to be working on, but I'm almost done with this thing, and I will show it in the next Media Monday, so subscribe. I recently moved to this apartment and had to build furniture and talked about that. I've also done a lot of in-depth reviews of things, like an episode of Parts Unknown where Anthony Bourdain went to Palestine, and Taylor Swift's latest albums. You know, I always have opinions on what Taylor Swift's up to. I love her. I have thoughts on the latest album. And I just like providing a bit of a grab bag of things that I'm thinking about and experiencing, and I think it's a good time. I know my readers enjoy this, so if you want to be one of my readers, the link is down below, along with links to all of the newsletters that I'm talking about today. But the next newsletter I want to discuss is Out of Your League. So on my Media Mondays, I've shared a ton of Frankie de la Cortaz's work lately, and it's because they've done so much work on Gaylors, Taylor Swift, PR, and more queer stuff, but their main focus is on female sports, and they go further in depth on kind of what they've published in terms of articles and things, through a very queer lens, and I love it. Their newsletter is a must-read for me because I know very little about women's sports other than tennis and women's gymnastics, but I really enjoy reading the tea and the news on women's sports, especially WNBA, because that tea is piping right now. I love it. And speaking of tea, I did not mean for this segue to happen, but the next newsletter I want to talk about is Courtney Milan's Weekly Tea. This newsletter is by lawyer and romance novelist Courtney Milan. Each week, she makes a new cup of tea, brews a new tea, and recently she actually grew her own tea leaves and made tea from those tea leaves, which was so impressive to me. And she discusses her life and her new romance novels that are coming out. And romance is a genre that I'm less familiar with, but I really enjoy Courtney Milan's viewpoint on this because she is biracial and Asian, and she really calls out a lot of the racist tendencies of the establishment of the romance world. I really appreciate that coming from a romance writer who does respect the genre, and even though it's a genre I'm less familiar with, I'm more in the children's realm and in the literary fiction realm with my job, so it's very cool to see her perspective on things. But it is mostly about tea, and I love tea. I'm drinking coffee right now, but I do really love tea. I'm Indian. I love chai. So it's really cool to see how she makes tea and all these independent tea farms and, you know, all sorts of things. Like, she really goes in on tea. So if you like tea, subscribe to that. Or if you like romance novels, subscribe to Courtney Milan's newsletter. So the next one is a recent find for me. This is Deep Voices by Matthew Schnipper. I found it while doing research for work, and I just fell in love with the writing. Every week, music critic Matthew Schnipper puts together a playlist and writes about each of the tracks, the artists, the producers, and it's definitely expanding my horizons in music. I am mostly pop and the sad girl indie stuff, and alt rock, of course. You know my love of Snow Patrol if you've been here for a long time, but in a very non-egotistical way. The way he writes reminds me of the way I write, because I write about my experience of media while also doing research and trying to be as knowledgeable as possible. And it reminds me of me in that I'd love it if my writing came across this way, not in a this reminds me of me, I'm so much better. No, the Matthew Schnipper is a better writer than I am, and I really appreciate his perspective on music. And yeah, basically I feel like the through line here is that I love reading what creatives have to say. I love talking about creativity. I really enjoy a newsletter that's curious about the world in some way, whether it's exploring the world, or your own mind, or a piece of art. I really like exploration and curiosity, I guess. But that is it for this video. Please comment if you read newsletters and what your favorite newsletter is. I'm always looking for a new one. And definitely leave multiple comments if it's my newsletter. I will have links to every newsletter I've discussed in the description and also probably in the pinned comment. So please check them out and support these writers. You can also subscribe to my newsletter for free by going to my Patreon. If you hit join for free, you'll get my newsletter weekly. And if you pay for a Patreon membership, you will get the archive of my newsletters. So my newsletters are locked to paid patrons after the new one gets posted. But yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you did. I will see you all next time. Bye! Special thanks to Theresa Schmid, Kellie Otis, Ben Birdperson, Eric Svensson, and UntappedInkwell for being my patrons. If you would like to support my video work or read my newsletter, head on over to my Patreon and check out the perks.